A young bartender from a Pennsylvania pub vanished on a Saturday night, leaving a mystery that consumed everyone who knew him. But 6 years later, exterminators in a nearby motel discover a chilling secret hidden beneath the carpet. A discovery that connects to the missing bartender in the most unexpected way and reveals a nightmare far more twisted than anyone could have imagined. The Pennsylvania countryside blurred past Caleb Bruner's windshield as he drove toward Lancaster. His 2003 Honda Accord had been humming for over an hour since he'd left his isolated home. The November afternoon was crisp and clear, typical for autumn in 2005. His phone buzzed on the passenger seat, the caller ID showing Detective Marissa Keene's number, a sequence of digits he'd memorized over the past 6 years. He flipped it open with one hand, keeping his eyes on the road. "Detective Keene," he answered, trying to keep the anticipation out of his voice. "Caleb, where are you now?" Her voice was professional, but an urgent undertone made his pulse quicken. "Just entered Lancaster. I'm about 15 minutes from the station." He slowed as he passed the Lancaster, heart of Pennsylvania Dutch country welcome sign. "Change of plans. Can you meet me at the Lancaster Pines Motel instead? It's not far from the station, maybe 10 minutes. Take Route 30 east, then turn north on Centerville Road. You'll see the neon sign on your right. Can't miss it." Caleb's grip tightened on the steering wheel. "What's this about, detective?" "I'll explain when you get here. I'll be waiting at the entrance." The line went dead. Caleb closed the phone and set it back on the seat, his mind racing. It had been 4 years since he'd last seen Detective Keene in person, though they had spoken periodically about Ethan's case. His younger brother had vanished 6 years ago, seemingly into thin air, leaving behind only questions and a family hollowed out by grief. Following the detective's directions, he found the Lancaster Pines Motel easily. It was a typical roadside establishment, 2 stories of faded blue doors facing a cracked parking lot. The neon sign flickered, the letters PNES struggling to stay lit. Several police cruisers were parked haphazardly near a ground floor unit, their presence drawing a crowd of onlookers. Caleb parked his Honda away from the commotion and scanned for the detective. He spotted her immediately. Marissa Keene hadn't changed much in 4 years. Her auburn hair was in the same practical ponytail, and her navy blazer was as crisp as ever. She was speaking with a uniformed officer, but looked up as he approached. "Caleb," she said, extending her hand. "Thanks for coming so quickly." He shook it, noting her firm grip. "What's going on here?" "Follow me." She led him through the gathering crowd. Motel guests in various states of dress clustered in the corridor, craning their necks to see into the open door of room 6. Staff in burgundy uniforms whispered among themselves. Detective Keene's presence parted them like a ship through water. Inside the unit, the scene was controlled chaos. Crime scene technicians photographed every surface while uniformed officers kept a perimeter. The room was standard motel fare, a dated floral bedspread, particle board furniture, and the lingering scent of industrial cleaner failing to mask years of transient occupation. "Hernandez," Detective Keene called to a woman in a maid's uniform standing with a nervous-looking man wearing a manager's name tag. "This is Caleb Bruner. Can you explain what you found?" The maid, Maria, wrung her hands as she spoke. "I was deep cleaning the room. We do it every few months. I noticed moths coming from under the carpet near the window. Lots of them. So Mr. Davidson here, he called the exterminator company." The manager, Davidson, continued the story. "When the exterminators started to roll back the carpet to check for an infestation, they found." He gestured toward the corner of the room where several technicians were working. Caleb moved closer and felt his stomach drop. On the exposed wooden floor, an elaborate symbol was drawn in what looked like black paint or marker. It was a pentagram enclosed in a circle with smaller symbols at each point. Dark stains, unmistakably old blood, spotted other areas of the floor, though not directly near the symbol. "What does this have to do with Ethan?" Caleb asked, his voice tight. "My brother was a devout Christian. He would never." Detective Keene held up an evidence bag. "We ran a preliminary DNA test on the blood. The field test matched it to your brother's profile. We had his DNA on file from personal items, his toothbrush and comb, that you provided 6 years ago." Caleb stared at the bag, trying to process the information. "The blood is 6 years old, and you're certain the test is accurate?" "Field tests aren't 100%, but they're reliable enough for us to proceed." She held up another evidence bag, this one containing a black cord with a pendant. "We also found this." Through the plastic, Caleb saw a simple Christian cross, the kind sold in religious bookstores throughout Pennsylvania. It was tarnished with age, but still recognizable. Detective Keene turned the bag so he could see the back of the cross, etched into the metal in small, precise letters. Ethan Matthew Brunner, June 15, 1999. That's his full name, Caleb said slowly. But the date? That's not his birthday or his baptism date. I don't know what that date means. The necklace matches the description in our files. You confirmed 6 years ago that he often wore a cross pendant. Yes, but I never really looked at the back. Never saw this date. Caleb handed the evidence bag back, his hands unsteady. Is there anything else? Any other sign of him? Not yet. We're still processing the scene. Detective Keene studied him carefully. Caleb, what do you make of that symbol? He looked again at the pentagram on the floor. It's obviously occult. Satanic, probably. Are there groups like that around here? The detective exchanged glances with another officer. Pennsylvania is deeply religious. Lancaster especially. We've had reports of some occult activity among college students. Mostly harmless stuff, kids being rebellious. There are a few groups, but nothing we could act on, no criminal activity we could prove. Did Ethan ever mention anything like this? Any strange groups? People who might have had a problem with him? No, never. He kept to himself mostly. Just worked weekends at that pub. Caleb paused. What about his boss? The pub owner? Out of town currently. We're trying to reach him. Detective Keene turned to the motel manager. Mr. Davidson, I need this room sealed. No one goes in or out without police authorization, and I strongly recommend you install security cameras. The lack of surveillance footage is going to make this investigation much harder. Davidson nodded vigorously. Of course, detective, whatever you need. She turned back to Caleb. I need to coordinate with my team, re-interview all the staff who were working 6 years ago. We'll need to track down anyone who's left since then. She paused, her expression softening. Why don't you get some rest? We'll handle the investigation from here. I think I'll stay in town for a few days, Caleb said. See if I can help somehow. She handed him some paperwork. I'll need you to sign these, confirming the identification of the personal effects. And Caleb, I'm sorry we're meeting again under these circumstances. He signed where indicated and returned the forms. As he left the room, he passed the manager, calling his staff together for questioning. At the front desk, Caleb booked a room for the night, his mind still reeling. The desk clerk processed his credit card efficiently, then hurried off to join the other staff. Alone in the lobby, Caleb noticed a rack of tourist brochures. One caught his eye, Lancaster nightlife. Among the listings was the Crossroads pub, noting it opened at noon daily. He checked his watch, 2:30 p.m. The pub where Ethan had worked, where he'd spent his last weekend before disappearing. Caleb pocketed the brochure and headed for his car. The Crossroads pub sat on a corner lot, its weathered brick facade and neon beer signs marking it as a local institution. Caleb pushed through the heavy wooden door, letting his eyes adjust to the dimness. The interior was exactly what he'd expected. Dark wood paneling, a long bar with brass fixtures, and the mingled scents of old beer and lemon cleaner. A lone bartender stood behind the bar, polishing glasses with mechanical precision. He was a thin man in his 40s with graying hair pulled back in a ponytail. He looked up as Caleb approached, setting down his towel. "What'll it be?" the bartender asked. "Jack and Coke," Caleb said, settling onto a bar stool. As the bartender mixed his drink, Caleb studied the man's efficient, practiced movements, the hallmark of someone who had been doing this for years. When the glass was set before him, Caleb took a sip before speaking. "Is the owner around today?" The bartender shook his head. "Nah, Mr. Cordell's been out of town for about a week. Business trip or something. Should be back soon, though." He picked up another glass. "Something I can help you with, maybe?" Caleb rotated his glass on the bar. "You hear about what's going on at the Lancaster Pines Motel? Police investigation?" The bartender's hands stilled for a moment before resuming their work. "Heard something about it. Cops found something in one of the rooms. Did you know Ethan Bruner? He used to work here." Now the bartender set the glass down entirely, his expression guarded. "Yeah, I knew Ethan. Worked some shifts with him back in the day. Good guy, reliable." His eyes narrowed slightly. "Why are you asking?" "I'm his brother, Caleb." The bartender's demeanor shifted immediately, a wall coming up behind his eyes. He picked up his towel again, his movements suddenly jerky. "Look, I already told the cops everything I knew 6 years ago. If they need to talk to me again, they know where to find me. They'll probably be here tomorrow anyway. I'm not trying to cause trouble, Caleb said, confused by the reaction. Ethan always spoke well of the people here. Said you were all like family. We were, until he disappeared. The bartender's voice was flat. Changed everything. Caleb leaned forward. Can you help me understand this town better? The community? I've heard there might be some unusual groups around. Cults, maybe even satanic ones. The bartender's laugh was humorless. Man, this is a college town. We get all types in here. Goths, punks, philosophy majors who think they're edgy. Nothing wrong with any of them, far as I can see. He moved down the bar, creating distance. They drink, they pay, they don't cause trouble. That's all I care about. But have you noticed any actual organized groups? Anyone who might have had a problem with Ethan? I serve drinks. I don't get involved in people's business. The door chimed as new customers entered. 2 college students, a young man and woman, both dressed in black jeans and band t-shirts. They approached the bar, pulling out their IDs before the bartender could ask. He checked them carefully, then poured 2 draft beers. Caleb finished his Jack and Coke, pulling out his wallet. He laid a 20 on the bar, enough to cover the drink and a decent tip. As he stood to leave, the bartender suddenly spoke. Look, I didn't mean to be rude, just trying to be careful about what I say. The owner, Mr. Cordell, he knew your brother better than any of us. When he gets back, he might be able to tell you more. The bartender glanced at Caleb, then away. But if you really want to know about Ethan, you might try his church. He went every Sunday morning, regular as clockwork. Which church? Don't know exactly which one, but there's a big Protestant church over on King Street. Lancaster Community Presbyterian. Most locals go there. He paused. Your brother was serious about his faith. Real serious. Thank you, Caleb said sincerely. He glanced at the college students, who were deep in conversation. Both wore unusual rings on their right hands, silver bands with a design he couldn't quite make out from this distance. Probably some band logo or fashion trend he was too old to understand. He left an extra 5 on the bar and headed for the door, the afternoon sunlight harsh after the pub's darkness. Caleb climbed back into his Honda and pulled out his Garmin GPS unit, typing in Lancaster Community Presbyterian. The device calculated the route, a 10-minute drive through the historic district. He pulled out of the pub's parking lot and followed the electronic voice's directions through Lancaster's tree-lined streets. The church came into view as he turned onto King Street, its white steeple rising above the surrounding buildings like a beacon. But it was the activity across the street that first caught his attention. Franklin and Marshall College students had set up some kind of fair or recruitment event in the park opposite the church. Colorful banners fluttered between temporary stalls, and students in matching black t-shirts moved between the tables. He recognized the same style of clothing the 2 students in the bar had worn. Caleb parked along the curb and walked toward the church, deliberately ignoring the student gathering. The Presbyterian church was an impressive structure, red brick with white trim, tall windows with proper glazing, and heavy oak doors that spoke of permanence and tradition. He pulled open one of the doors and stepped into the narthex. The interior was quiet for a weekday afternoon, but not empty. From the sanctuary, he could hear voices raised in harmony, a choir rehearsing. He followed the sound, his footsteps echoing on the polished floor. In the sanctuary, about 15 people stood in the choir loft, their voices blending in a traditional hymn. A man in his 50s stood before them, conducting with precise movements. He wore a clerical collar and black shirt, clearly the pastor. Caleb waited in a pew until the song ended, then approached as the pastor gave notes to his choir. The man noticed him and excused himself, walking down to meet Caleb with an extended hand. Welcome to Lancaster Community Presbyterian. I'm Pastor David Hartley. Caleb Bruner, he replied, shaking the offered hand. Sorry to interrupt your rehearsal. Not at all. The choir can practice on their own for a few minutes. Pastor Hartley's eyes were kind but searching. What brings you to our church today? I'm looking for information about my brother, Ethan Bruner. He went missing 6 years ago. Someone told me he might have been a member of your congregation. The pastor's brow furrowed thoughtfully. Ethan Bruner. I'm afraid the name doesn't immediately ring a bell. You have to understand, we have over 700 members at each service, and we hold 3 services every Sunday. I tend to remember those most active in church programs. He paused. Do you have a photograph? Caleb pulled out his Motorola Razr flip phone, navigating to the saved photos. He showed the pastor a picture of Ethan from his bartending days, proudly displaying 2 colorful cocktails he'd created. The cross pendant was clearly visible against his white shirt. Ah, Pastor Hartley said, pointing at the screen. I don't recognize the young man, but I definitely recognize that cross. We give those to members who complete our evangelism seminar, Winning Souls for Christ. It's an intensive 12-week course on sharing the gospel and bringing new disciples to the Lord. There's a date engraved on the back, Caleb said. June 15th, 1999. Would that mean anything? That would be his graduation date from the seminar. We always engrave them as a commemoration. The pastor's expression grew more serious. If your brother completed that course, he was a dedicated Christian, baptized, and committed to spreading God's word. Caleb took a breath. Pastor, the police found something this morning at the Lancaster Pines Motel. There was an occult symbol drawn on the floor and blood that matches my brother's DNA. Pastor Hartley's face darkened. I cannot believe anyone who wore that cross would willingly participate in occult practices. It goes against everything we teach, everything the seminar represents. I agree, Caleb said. I think someone else did this to him. Someone who might be part of an occult group. He leaned forward. Are there groups like that in Lancaster? The pastor sighed deeply, glancing toward the windows. I'm afraid so. It's actually why we started the evangelism seminar in the first place. We've seen an alarming increase in occult fascination among young people, especially college students. Witchcraft, magic circles, ritual practices. What starts as rebellion or curiosity can lead to much darker places. How organized are these groups? More than you might think. They don't just meet in secret anymore. They hold open festivals, recruit at student organizations. They're bold about it. Pastor Hartley gestured toward the window. That event across the street, I guarantee you'll find at least one or two occult groups recruiting there. And the police don't do anything? What can they do? Freedom of religion, freedom of assembly. Until there's criminal activity they can prove, their hands are tied. The pastor's voice carried frustration. But it's very much the church's concern. The Lord forbids such practices, and we must protect our flock. Caleb stood. Maybe I should check out that student event. If you do, be careful, Pastor Hartley warned. Most of the students are just curious kids following trends. But the leaders, the ones really running these groups, they must have agendas. Why do you say that? We've had reports from congregation members, stories of rituals, ceremonies, but no one's ever brought forward real evidence of illegal activities. The pastor paused. Regarding your brother, I'll cooperate fully with any investigation. Now that you mention it, I do remember the police coming here 6 years ago asking questions. I'll help however I can. Thank you, Pastor. I appreciate your time. Remember, Pastor Hartley said as Caleb turned to leave, if you do encounter these people, pray for God's protection, and if you see anything illegal, contact the police immediately. Caleb nodded, shook the pastor's hand again, and walked back through the sanctuary. The choir had resumed their rehearsal, their voices following him out into the afternoon sun. Outside Lancaster Community Presbyterian, the afternoon sun cast long shadows across King Street. The student event in the park was clearly winding down. Several stalls had already been dismantled, and students were loading folding tables into vans. It made sense. They'd probably been there since morning, and it was now pushing 3:30 p.m. Caleb stood on the church steps, debating his approach. He was 32, clearly not college-aged, and would stand out among the students. As he weighed his options, a group of 5 students emerged from behind one of the remaining stalls. They were impossible to miss. Heavy black makeup rimmed their eyes, their hair styled in deliberately messy spikes and colors that didn't occur in nature. They moved as a pack, laughing at some private joke. One of them, a young man with green-streaked hair, pointed directly at Caleb standing on the church steps. The whole group turned to look, and their laughter grew louder. They began making exaggerated signs of the cross, mockingly genuflecting in his direction. "Bless you, church boy," one of the girls called out, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Caleb noticed they all wore identical rings on their right hands, the same style he'd glimpsed at the bar. Now he could see them more clearly, silver bands with what appeared to be a ram's head design. He chose to ignore their taunts, watching as they climbed into a beat-up Ford Taurus and peeled out of their parking spot. Behind them, another group of similarly dressed students was struggling with the remnants of their stall. They carried rolled banners, a folding table, and boxes of what looked like flyers or promotional materials. One student, a girl with jet black hair and purple streaks, was trying to manage a particularly unwieldy banner that must have been 10 feet long. She stepped backward into the street, the banner blocking her view of oncoming traffic. Caleb saw the Chevy Silverado before she did. It was coming fast, the driver probably not expecting anyone to step into the road mid-block. Without thinking, Caleb sprinted forward, grabbing the girl around the waist and pulling her backward. They both tumbled onto the asphalt as the truck roared past, its horn blaring angrily. The banner flew from her hands, landing in a crumpled heap nearby. "Jesus," the girl gasped, sprawled on the street. "That was close. Are you hurt?" Caleb asked, helping her to her feet. His palms were scraped from the fall, but nothing serious. "No, I'm okay, thanks to you." She brushed off her black jeans, looking shaken. "I didn't even see it coming." Her friends had noticed the commotion and came running. "Lily, what happened?" "I'm fine," she assured them. "This guy saved me." Caleb helped gather her scattered materials. The banner advertising something called Alternative Spirituality Society, a box of flyers with symbols he didn't recognize, and what looked like incense bundles. "Let me help you get this to your car," he offered. Lily nodded gratefully, and they walked to a Honda Civic parked down the block. Her friends had gone back to loading their own vehicle. As they loaded items into her back seat and trunk, Caleb couldn't help but notice the trunk's other contents. A box filled with what looked like hand-rolled cigarettes, probably marijuana, given the distinct herbal smell. Several cases of Keystone Light beer, and another sealed box he couldn't identify. Lily quickly closed the trunk. "Thanks again. Really. I could have been killed." Her friends whistled from their car. "Lily, come on." "I got to go," she said, hurrying to the driver's side. "But seriously, thank you." She drove off, following her friend's vehicle. It wasn't until her Honda was stopped at the intersection a block away that Caleb noticed something glinting in the street where they had fallen. He waited for a break in traffic, then retrieved it. It was one of those silver rings, clearly Lily's, now bent and broken from being run over by multiple vehicles. The design was clearer up close, definitely a goat's head surrounded by a pentagram. The band was cracked nearly in half. Caleb looked up to see Lily's car still waiting at the red light. Without really thinking about it, he jogged to his own car. She'd been saved from a tragedy. The least he could do was return her property. Maybe she needed it for something. He started his engine and pulled out, keeping her Honda in sight. As the light turned green, Caleb maintained a careful distance behind Lily's Honda Civic as it followed the other student's car through Lancaster's outskirts. The buildings grew sparser, replaced by farmland and patches of forest. After 20 minutes, they'd clearly left the town limits, and Caleb's unease grew. Where were these students heading? The road wound through Pennsylvania's rural landscape, past weathered barns and fallow fields preparing for winter. Traffic thinned until they were virtually alone on the Tulane Highway. After another 10 minutes, Lily's turn signal blinked, and she pulled onto the shoulder. The lead car stopped 100 yards ahead. Caleb pulled over behind her, his hands slightly trembling as he turned off the engine. Through his windshield, he watched Lily exit her car, her body language tense. He stepped out to meet her. "Why are you following me?" Her voice was sharp, frightened. "What do you want?" Caleb raised his hands peacefully. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to scare you. You dropped this back there." He pulled the broken ring from his pocket. "I thought you might need it." Lily took the mangled silver band, examining the cracked goat's head design. Her expression softened slightly. "Oh, it's destroyed." She looked up at him. "It's useless now, but thanks for trying, I guess." She turned back toward her car, but Caleb called after her. "Wait, where are you guys heading? This is pretty far from Lancaster." "That's none of your business." Her guard was back up. "We're just going on a road trip. College stuff." The other car's doors opened, and 3 students approached. 2 guys and a girl, all wearing the same dark clothing and silver rings. One of the males, tall with a shaved head, stepped protectively near Lily. "This guy bothering you, Lil?" "No, it's fine. He was just returning my ring. The one that got crushed when he saved me." The tall student looked Caleb up and down. "Okay, well, you did your good deed. Now stop following us or we'll call the cops." "Got it?" "Sure, no problem," Caleb said, backing toward his car. "Just wanted to return her property. I'll head back to town now." He got into his Honda, watching as the group walked back to their vehicles. But with his window cracked, their voices carried on the quiet country air. "Damn, Lily. Father's going to be pissed when he sees you broke your ring," the tall one said, laughing. "Screw it," another voice chimed in. "We'll still get to party with those Jesus freaks tonight. It's going to be King lit." They all laughed, and one of them made a crude gesture that made Caleb's stomach turn. The casual mention of Christians, combined with the occult rings and the supplies he'd seen in Lily's trunk, set off every alarm in his head. He started his engine and pulled a U-turn, driving back toward Lancaster for about a quarter-mile before pulling into a farm's access road. He waited 5 minutes, then turned around again. If these students were planning something involving Christians, and given what had been found at the motel, he couldn't just drive away. Keeping his distance, he spotted their cars ahead and followed at a gap of nearly half a mile. The route took them north, then west, following increasingly remote roads. Signs indicated they were heading toward Perry County. After an hour of driving, they entered the Tuscarora State Forest. The forest road was narrow, canopied by tall pines that blocked out much of the late afternoon sun. It was past 5 p.m. now, and shadows lengthened between the trees. Caleb hung back even further, catching only glimpses of the cars ahead on the winding road. After another 40 minutes of careful pursuit, he saw brake lights through the trees. The cars had turned onto an even smaller dirt road. Caleb slowed, then followed, his Honda suspension protesting the rutted surface. Through the forest, he glimpsed a structure, an old barn, its red paint faded to brown, sitting in a clearing. He pulled off the dirt road about 200 yards from the barn, parking behind a thick stand of pines. From here, he could see the students unloading their vehicles. They carried the cases of beer, the boxes, and other supplies toward the barn's entrance. Once they'd all gone inside, and the heavy door slid shut, Caleb crept closer. Using the tree line for cover, he approached until he could see through one of the barn's few windows. The interior was dark except for flickering candlelight. Shadowy figures moved about, and he could make out what looked like robes being pulled on over street clothes. Caleb checked his phone. 2 bars of signal. Not great, but enough for emergency calls. He settled behind a large oak tree to watch, wondering if he was overreacting. Maybe this was just some harmless college party. A bunch of kids playing at being occultists. They all looked over 21. The beer was legal. He was about to head back to his car when a scream pierced the forest quiet. It wasn't a party scream or a laugh. It was pure agony, raw and desperate. Caleb's blood went cold. He fumbled for his phone, punching in 911. Another scream echoed from the barn as the call connected. 911, what's your emergency? I'm at an old barn in Tuscarora State Forest off Route 274. I heard screaming. The barn door suddenly flew open, crashing against its frame. A figure burst out, a naked man, pale in the dying light, running with desperate, lurching strides toward the forest. Caleb dropped his phone, pressing himself against the tree. The man stumbled closer, and Caleb's heart nearly stopped. Even from 30 yards away, even after 6 years, he knew that gait, that build. Ethan, he whispered. Robed figures emerged from the barn, but they moved without urgency, spreading out in a casual search pattern. They seemed confident their quarry wouldn't get far. Caleb darted between trees, intercepting his brother's path. Ethan, he hissed. His brother spun wildly, eyes wide with terror, searching for the voice's source. It's me, Caleb, your brother. He stepped into view, and their eyes met. Recognition dawned in Ethan's haunted face. Caleb, what are you? No, you can't be here. It's dangerous. You have to leave. I'm not leaving you. Caleb shrugged off his jacket, wrapping it around his brother's trembling shoulders. That's when he saw Ethan's hands, or what remained of them. All 10 fingers were gone, leaving scarred stumps. His feet were the same, toes amputated. Dear God, Ethan, what did they? The devils, Ethan sobbed. They torture us. They'll kill us slowly. They took my fingers and toes one by one every time I tried to escape. I don't have any left, so God knows what they'll take next. Rustling leaves announced the search party's approach. Caleb grabbed his brother's arm, trying to guide him deeper into the forest, but the robed students had already flanked them. Strong hands seized both brothers, dragging them back toward the barn. Let us go, Caleb shouted. What you're doing here is illegal. I called the police. One student pulled back his hood, the tall one from earlier. Hey, father. This one came out of the church earlier. He must be Christian, too. A figure in a more elaborate robe stepped forward, his face hidden in shadow. When he spoke, his voice carried a slight accent Caleb couldn't place. Excellent. Lucifer has blessed us with another lamb. He gestured to his followers. Bring them inside. Prepare the crosses. You're insane. Caleb struggled against the hands holding him. The leader stepped closer, his breath reeking of alcohol and something chemical. Your Bible says that whoever follows Christ must walk as he walked. That means suffering. That's a crucifixion. We're just helping you live out your own scripture. The leader turned to his followers. Get the inverted cross ready for our wandering friend, Ethan. He's out of fingers to offer, so maybe his eyes will do the trick this time. No! Ethan screamed. Please no more. They were dragged into the barn's dark and dirty interior, which smelled of incense, sweat, and pure dread. In the flickering candlelight, Caleb could see weird symbols painted on the walls and several wooden crosses propped up against the back. A silver tray on a makeshift altar held a handful of pills and an ornate goblet filled with red wine. Take 2 pills each, a hooded figure commanded. Then drink the wine. It'll make things easier. Caleb and Ethan were frozen in place. Then, with a burst of desperate energy, Caleb swept his arm across the tray, sending the pills flying across the dirt floor and the wine splashing against the wall. Crap! Get those pills! The cultists dropped to their knees, fumbling frantically for the scattered drugs in the dim light. In that moment of chaos, one sound cut through everything, police sirens getting louder, coming fast through the forest. The wailing sirens electrified Caleb, giving him a surge of desperate courage. As the robed figures scrambled for the pills, he twisted violently out of their grasp. His eyes scanned the barn and landed on an ornate wooden chair where the leader had been sitting. Draped over the arm was a leather holster holding what looked like a .38 revolver. Without a second thought, Caleb lunged for it, his fingers closing around the cold grip. "Everybody back!" he shouted, his voice shaking but firm. "Get away from my brother." The cultists froze. The one still holding Ethan pressed a knife to his throat. "Drop the gun, or we'll bleed him out right here." "You kill him, and I start shooting," Caleb said, surprised by his own steady voice. "Starting with your father." The sirens were getting louder now. It sounded like multiple cars. The leader pushed back his hood, revealing a weathered face with cold, dark eyes and graying hair. He looked more like a businessman than a cult leader, except for the cold, savage look in his eyes. "You won't shoot," he said calmly. "Christians don't." A sudden commotion erupted from the shadows. Figures burst out from behind stacked hay bales and farm equipment, naked, scarred, and very much alive. The other Christian captives threw themselves at their captors with the desperate strength of people who had nothing left to lose. The barn exploded into total chaos. Robed figures wrestled with their former victims. The knife dropped from Ethan's throat as his captor was tackled. Someone knocked over a candelabra, making the shadows dance wildly on the walls. Caleb didn't waste a second. He ran for the barn door, threw it open, and yelled, "In here! We need help in here!" State police cruisers screeched to a halt in the clearing, their lights painting the trees red and blue. Officers poured out, guns drawn, moving with practiced precision. "Drop the weapon!" one of them shouted at Caleb. He immediately placed the revolver on the ground and raised his hands. "There are victims inside. They need help." The officers swept past him into the barn. What followed was swift and professional. Commands rang out. "On the ground. Hands where I can see them." Outnumbered and caught off guard, the cultists put up very little resistance. One by one, they were handcuffed and led outside. Officers made them kneel in a line on the grass as more police vehicles arrived. EMTs were right behind them, wheeling gurneys and carrying medical supplies. Caleb watched as an officer pulled the hood off the leader, revealing his face in the flashing lights. The officer's eyes went wide. He spoke urgently into his radio, and Caleb caught fragments. Positive ID. Salvador Herrera. Mexican national. Wanted list. More officers surrounded the kneeling leader, their demeanor shifting from routine arrest to high alert. The victims were being helped from the barn now, wrapped in thermal blankets. Some were walking, others carried. Caleb counted 5 besides Ethan, all showing signs of long-term captivity and abuse. Their relief was palpable. Some cried, others stared at the sky in stunned silence, a sky they probably thought they'd never see again. Among the arrested cultists, Caleb recognized several faces from the student fair. There was the tall one with the shaved head, who now looked young and scared without his hood. And there was Lily, the girl he'd helped earlier. Her heavy makeup was smeared with tears, her expression a mix of shame and terror as an officer cuffed her hands behind her back. A detective approached Caleb, notebook in hand. "Sir, I'm Detective Rodriguez. Can you tell me how you ended up here?" Caleb pointed to Lily. "I helped that girl earlier today when she almost got hit by a car. She dropped her ring. It had a cult symbol on it, and I tried to return it. That's what led me to follow them here." "We'll need a full statement," Rodriguez said. "These people are going to be thoroughly questioned at the station." We'll sort out who's a victim and who's a perpetrator. He paused, looking at the barn where crime scene technicians were now entering. This is going to be a major investigation. From inside the barn, Caleb heard an officer shout, "We've got a hidden room here. Stairs going down. Holy crap, there's a whole underground setup." More emergency vehicles arrived. FBI, ATF, even what looked like the DEA. Whatever they'd stumbled onto was much bigger than a simple cult. Caleb. He turned to see Ethan on a gurney, an oxygen mask over his face. Caleb rushed to his brother's side, tears finally coming. They gripped each other's hands, or in Ethan's case, what was left of them. "I thought you were dead," Caleb whispered. 6 years, Ethan. We thought you were gone." Ethan pulled the mask aside slightly. "So much happened. Can't, not now. Someday I'll tell you everything," his voice broke. "It's okay," Caleb said. "You don't have to explain anything. You're alive. That's all that matters." An EMT gently replaced Ethan's oxygen mask. "Sir, we need to transport him now. He's severely dehydrated, malnourished, and the amputations show signs of infection. He needs immediate hospital care." "Which hospital?" Caleb asked. "Lancaster General. Are you family?" "I'm his brother. You can follow us, but we need to go now." Caleb squeezed Ethan's hand one last time, then ran to his Honda. As he started the engine, he took one last look at the scene. Police cars everywhere, cultists being loaded into vans, forensic teams setting up floodlights. In the strobing lights, the old barn looked like something out of a horror movie. He pulled out behind the ambulance, following the flashing lights back through the darkening forest toward Lancaster and whatever came next. The Lancaster General Hospital emergency room was a controlled frenzy of activity. Medical staff rushed between curtained areas where the rescued victims were being treated. Caleb found himself in the waiting room, suddenly exhausted as the adrenaline drained from his system. The institutional chairs and fluorescent lighting felt surreal after the nightmare in the barn. He knew he needed to tell someone who would understand the spiritual significance of what had happened. Walking to the nurse's station, he asked the desk clerk, "Could I get the number for Lancaster Community Presbyterian Church? I need to contact the pastor." The clerk wrote the number on a post-it note. Caleb used the courtesy phone in the corner, his fingers trembling. "Lancaster Presbyterian, how may I help you?" "This is Caleb Bruner. I spoke with Pastor Hartley this afternoon. Is he available? It's urgent." "One moment, please." The pastor's voice came on the line. "Caleb, what happened?" "They found him. Ethan's alive. We're at Lancaster General." The words tumbled out as he explained the rescue, the cult, everything. "Dear Lord," Pastor Hartley breathed. "I'm coming right now. Tell Ethan we're praying for him." Caleb had barely hung up when he saw Detective Keene enter the ER with another officer. She spotted him and walked over. "Caleb, we need to take your statement. There's a family conference room we can use." He followed them to a small room with a round table and a box of tissues, a clear sign that this was a space for tough conversations. Detective Keene activated a small tape recorder while her partner took notes. For the next 40 minutes, Caleb recounted everything from leaving the church to the moment police arrived at the barn. The detectives interrupted occasionally for clarification, but mostly let him talk. When he finished, Detective Keene leaned back. "The students are talking. Most are terrified college kids who got in way over their heads. But we've uncovered something much bigger." "The leader?" Caleb asked. "Salvador Herrera, a Mexican national who's been on the DEA's wanted list for 18 years. He's been running drug operations across the Northeast. But this," she shook her head, "this is new. He created a cult to move product, supplying drugs to his inner circle, his faithful, in exchange for recruiting new members. New recruits had to buy drugs for rituals to prove loyalty. It was a self-sustaining market. The Christian victims came later. Some members had a genuine hatred for Christians and saw this as a way to serve Satan by making them suffer like Christ. Herrera encouraged it. It kept them distracted from his real business." She consulted her notes. "According to Bryce Hajuet, one of the students we arrested, your brother was specifically targeted." "Why Ethan?" "He converted one of their former leaders to Christianity, Travis Cordell, the bar owner where Ethan worked. Cordell left the cult, became a Christian, and they blamed Ethan. It was revenge." Caleb felt sick. Travis Cordell was part of the cult. But if he's been free all this time, why didn't he say anything? "He's back with the cult now," Detective Keene said. "When they captured Ethan, the cult made Travis believe the Christian God had no real power and couldn't even protect his own people. Because of his past betrayal, Travis was no longer in a leadership role. They demoted him, kept him at the bottom until he could prove his loyalty again. Keen pulled out a photograph and placed it on the table. Hazuit told us exactly what happened. Saturday night, 6 years ago, Ethan closed the bar and stepped outside for some air. They were waiting, injected him with methamphetamine, and threw him into the trunk of a car. The motel, room 6. They performed their ritual there. That's where the symbol and blood came from. The front desk clerk, Sadie Morrison, was part of the cult. She made sure no one investigated, then disappeared shortly after. After the motel, they took Ethan to the barn. She showed him another photograph, a cellar wall covered in scratched crosses and Bible verses. In one corner, in shaky letters, were the words, Ethan B. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. Caleb's vision blurred with tears. He wrote that when he still had fingers. The conditions were horrific. They kept Christian victims alive to torture them, mocking their faith by saying they should suffer like Christ. Twisted theology. Detective Keen's voice held disgust. Herrera is facing federal drug charges, kidnapping, torture, and possibly murder if we find bodies in that underground room. The students face various charges based on their involvement. A knock interrupted them. A doctor in scrubs peered in. Mr. Bruner, your brother is stable and in room 314. You can see him now. Caleb thanked the detectives and hurried to the elevator. On the 3rd floor, he followed the signs to room 314. Through the doorway, he saw Ethan propped up in the hospital bed, for lines running into his arms, looking small and fragile under the white sheets. Ethan. His brother's eyes opened, focusing slowly. Caleb. The name came out as a whisper. Caleb pulled a chair close, carefully taking Ethan's mutilated hand. The tears flowed freely now. 6 years of grief, guilt, and hope all mixed together. Ethan's lips moved, barely audible. Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. For you are with me, Caleb finished. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. A figure appeared in the doorway. Pastor Hartley, still in his clerical collar, was carrying a worn Bible. May I? He asked gently. Caleb nodded, and the pastor entered, standing at the foot of the bed. Ethan, I'm Pastor Hartley from Lancaster Presbyterian. Your brother told me what happened. We've been praying for you. The whole congregation has been praying for 6 years. Ethan's eyes filled with tears. The pastor opened his Bible, but didn't read from it. Instead, he prayed from the heart for healing, for peace, for the other victims, and even for the souls of those who had done such evil. As the prayer ended, Caleb felt something shift in the room. Not a dramatic miracle, but a quiet presence. His brother was alive, damaged, scarred, but alive. The valley of the shadow of death hadn't claimed him. Through faith, through hope, and through a love that endured 6 years of not knowing, they had found their way back to each other. In that hospital room, with machines beeping and the PA system calling out for doctors, Caleb understood that sometimes the greatest testimonies come from the darkest places. Ethan squeezed his hand weakly, and Caleb squeezed back. No words were needed. They were together again. Everything else could wait.